Okay, welcome to episode 33 of the Goldenberg Destiny Project. So in the previous episode, we traced the history of the kingdom of Israel all the way down to the completion of its survival until the country was defeated by the Assyrians and the people were deported to other countries and the kingdom of Israel ceased to exist. Now, this episode, I want to backtrack a little bit and trace the parallel history of the kingdom of Yehuda. So the kingdom of Yehuda started out very well. It had David and Shlomo and Rechavam and Aviam and Asa, like the Medrash says, these are the five, the Esa Zomer Igia, they were good. The problem started with Shidduchim. The problem started when Asa decided to support the claims of Omri to the throne of Israel, of the kingdom of Israel, and in order to seal their alliance, he married off his son Yehoshaphat to Omri's daughter. Omri's daughter was Achav's sister. That was the first shidduch. So right away they became Mechutanim. When later Yehoshaphat married off his own son, Yoram, he married him to the daughter of Achav and Izebel. Her name was Asalia. So this was already geknippt and gebinden, like the first shidduch, and now the second shidduch. So this was the Chassan and the Kala were cousins. They were first cousins, and this cemented the connection of the dynasty of Yehuda with the house of Omri. And this was terrible. Because what happened was that Yehoram, who was the son of Yehoshaphat, when Yehoshaphat died, he became king. But the first thing he did was he assassinated all his siblings to make sure that he didn't have any rivals for the throne. And ironically, he has a cousin, Yehoram, who was a son of Achav, a grandson of Achav. Achav had a son, Achaziah, and his son was Yehoram. He was a better king than the Yehoram who was in Yehuda. He was not so terrible. It was, not so terrible means still terrible, but the Yehoram of Yehuda was very bad. And then when he died, he was succeeded by his son Achaziah. And when Achaziah died, his wife, Yehoram's wife, Asalia, who was the daughter of Achav and Izebel, decided that she wants to be the queen. And she assassinated all the heirs to the throne, everybody. There was nobody who was heir to the throne, and she took the crown. But one child was survived. His name was Yoash, and he was saved by his aunt, Yehosheva, who was married to Yehoyada the Kohen Gadol, and they saved this child, and they saved him in the Beis Hamikdash, near the Kodesh HaKodeshim. I'm not exactly sure exactly where, but it seems to be there was like a bedroom on top of the Kodesh Kadoshim, and that's where he was. Now, if she had succeeded in killing Yoash, then that would have been the end of the Ben Achaben line of David, because all the David's, the straight line of Ben Achaben being kings of Yehuda would have been ended. And then maybe they would have found a cousin, a relative to continue, but that would have ended. But she didn't. She was not successful. And Yoash survived, and he, when he was 6 years old, he was 1 year old at the time when they hit him, and when 6 years later, when he was 7 years old, they took him out and they crowned him, and the people, so people were not happy with Asalia. She was a harsh queen, and she was like a tyrantess maybe. I don't know how you say that, but whatever it was, that's what she was. And when they took out Yoash and they crowned him, then the people revolted, and of course, what's important here is she also introduced the Baal cult to Yehuda, because she was from Achav and Izebel, her mother. Her father were Baal worshippers, and she brought her into Yehuda. So when the people revolted, she was killed, and the Baal was destroyed, and things settled down. Yoash, during his whole lifetime, Yoash ruled for 40 years. And during the time, he was, he did some good things. He raised money to renovate the Beis HaMikdash, which had gone into disrepair during Asalia's time, because what did she care about the Beis HaMikdash? And he had Yehoyada, the Kohen Gadol, was his advisor. And as long as he had Yehoyada as his advisor, he stayed on the straight and true path, and he did good things, and he was a decent, good king. But when Yehoyada died, he no longer had the Kohen Gadol as his advisor. So then the people around him told him that really he's a god, because people go into the Kodesh Kadosh and they die, and you were there for 6 years and you survived, so you must be a god. So he said, really? Okay, I'm a god, And then he started thinking of himself as a god. Then they went out and they had, I'm not sure exactly what the ramifications and how long he reigned as a god, but then they had a war with Syria, and he was wounded on the battlefield, and on his deathbed, his generals assassinated him. That was the end of Yoash. Now, there was a century after Asalia was killed. There was a century in Yehuda which was pretty good. There was Yoash, and he was followed by Amaziah, and he was followed by Uzziah, and he was followed by Yosam. It was about 100 years, and things were pretty good. There was no Baal worship, but the private bama still subsisted. This is an enigma, but it's not such. I'm trying to explain what it was, because the people, they were religious, they were Jewish, they did mitzvahs, but they knew that shchutei chutz, that to bring a carbon on the outside of the Beis HaMikdash, they knew that it was a very serious avera. They knew it, and they knew it was a chayv krisis. It's a shchutei chutz, it's chayv kares, very, very serious avera. But they did it anyway. Why? Because they didn't want to have to. They wanted. Imagine if you would have told people that you can only pray in the Beis HaMikdash. You can't pray anywhere else. So people would be very upset about that, because people need to pray. They need it. So the only time I could pray is if I go to Yerushalayim and go to the Beis HaMikdash and I spend the money and I stop working and all this effort, and that's the only time I can pray. I can't pray here. So even if they would be forbidden to pray, they would pray anyway. Then they would sort of, okay, fine, so I'm not allowed to, but I have to. So that was the same thing that they felt that they really needed. They really needed to bring karbanos. They needed to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom, even though they're serving him in a way which was a violation of his Torah. People can rationalize somehow to take things which makes no sense and do them anyway. Everybody does that to a certain extent. We know that, right? You're a real religious person. There's that, but there's stuff that you do. You really you shouldn't do it, and you say, okay, okay, what? But okay, and that's what they did. They did that, and otherwise, they did. They had Yontif, and they ate matzah, and they took a Esrog Elul, and they wore tefillin, but this they did. Now, what happens then is that they're serving the way to come close to God, to come close to Rebbeinu Shalom, is Mesil Sharm says, through mitzvahs. Mitzvahs bring us close to Rebbeinu Shalom. If you're doing mitzvahs, and you know that there's one very big aveira that you constantly do, that means that your mitzvahs become pretty hollow. You're doing it, this is what you used to, this is your culture, this is your heritage, this is what you do, but there's no life to them, no fire to them, because you know that next thing you're going to go out in the back, you're going to bring the carbon, which is absolutely forbidden. So what happens then is that the whole condition of the people was like corrupted, and therefore their whole moral standing was corrupted, and their whole spiritual standing was corrupted, and the whole society became riddled with greed and exploitation. If you look in the Nevi'im, look what the Yeshaya, all these people, they took advantage of Avodas and Yisraelim, and they stole from each other, and there were all these terrible midas, that things that people did. All these things came because their observance of mitzvahs were not genuine. They weren't real. They just did it. They figured somehow to make a compromise, but that really made them lowered them. So therefore, so that persisted. So this was 100 years, which this is the way it sort of chugged along, and there were no major crises. But this was, there was no Avodah Zarah, just the private altars. But then somebody was born whose name was Achaz. Achaz was the son of Yosam, and Achaz was a Baal worshipper, and he brought the Baal into Yehuda. Now he had an effect. People started worshiping the Baal, because if your observance, your avodah to the Rebbeinu Shalom is hollow, so you're much more vulnerable to the Baal, because like this, you're doing avodah, but you're doing it, this is to the Rebbeinu Shalom, this is to Baal. It's not, it doesn't make that much difference anymore. And like when you're doing the avodah in your little bum in the backyard, it's really like a pitiable situation. You're there out in the back, or maybe if you're rich, you have a nice big one, but you're not going to a temple, you're not going to something which is big and beautiful and lavish, right?
Glamorous.
This is something glamorous, and you're just sitting there in your backyard next to your barbecue. You have a little bummer, and you're bringing your korbanos. And here you have these temples in a Baal. You can go in there and you could do, you have performances and singers and dancers, and it's much more attractive. And if your Yiddishkeit, if your Jewishness is very weak, so then, I'm not saying everybody did it. I'm sure it was only a minority of the people, but a minority is a lot, and they were vulnerable to this. So that's what happened. Now, when Achaz died, then there was a very big change. Achaz's son was Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu became the king. Chizkiyahu was a king in the mold of David and Shlomo. He was a very great tzaddik, a very, very great king. He was one of the Baalei Messiah. He was very great, and he could. The Gemara says that he could have been Mashiach. He was so great. And what did he do? So he destroyed the Baal, and he also got rid of the Bamais, got rid of the private altars. Now, how did he do that? So I would like to suggest there's another thing that he did. What Chizkiyahu did was he introduced universal Torah education. Everybody had to learn. There was kamat no ignoramus in Klal Yisrael, and there were children who knew Hilchos Taharos, and there was such a tremendous proliferation of Torah study. Now, almost like this, we say on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we say, Kachenu mitzvaysecha v'senchalkenu b'soresecha. First we talk about mitzvahs and then Torah. Whereas when we say in Birchas Krishma, we say Hari Eneinu b'soresecha v'dabel kibein mitzvaysecha. We talk about Torah first and then mitzvahs. So which one should come first, Torah or mitzvahs? Here we say Kachenu mitzvaysecha v'senchalkenu b'soresecha, and here we say Hari Eneinu b'soresecha v'dabel kibein mitzvaysecha. And the same thing we say in the morning. We say Targaleinu b'soresecha v'dakeinu mitzvaysecha, and we say it at the end of Shmoneh Esrei, Psach libi b'sorusecha, v'achrim b'secha tirdav nafshi. So here is the order is in reverse. So I think the pshat is like this. Kachenu mitzvah. What does it mean to be mekadosh the mitzvahs? Rebbeinu Shalom, what does he do? How we become mekadosh mitzvahs? It's very simple. Rebbeinu Shalom gives us a mitzvah, and he gives us the opportunity to do it. We're immediately mekadosh b'mitzvahs. We have mitzvahs. Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the mitzvahs. We have the mitzvahs. We're immediately mekadosh b'mitzvahs. So in order to come to Torah, to have a chelik in Torah, first you have to be mekadosh b'mitzvahs. If you're not mekadosh b'mitzvahs, you come in there with, just like, like a non-Jew, you come in there, you come to Torah, you have no shaychus to the Torah. If you're mekudesh in the mitzvahs, then regardless of your level of observance, once you're mekudesh in mitzvahs, then you have a chelik in the Torah. But if you want to come to madregas in your mitzvahs, you want to have dveikas, dapkenu mitzvah hachmer secha tirdav nafshi, you want that Torah has to come first. You cannot have dveikus in the mitzvah. You cannot have redifa achara mitzvahs unless you come to it from Torah first. If you would be, sometimes you have simple people that they're very excited about doing a mitzvah, and they run after get a lulav, and they're running and this and that. That's a beautiful thing, and it's the taiva. But that's not true dveikus in the mitzvahs. Dveikus in the mitzvahs means that you have a connection to the heart and soul of the mitzvah. And if you don't understand anything, if you don't have Torah, you don't have an understanding of the mitzvah, then what your connection is superficial. Now I understand that some people, they don't have Torah, but they love Judaism and they love the mitzvahs and they do them. I think it's a wonderful thing, but I would not call that dveikus b'mitzvahs. Dveikus b'mitzvahs comes from a deep understanding and comes from the Torah. So if you're talking about dveikus, if you're talking about achar mesecha tirdav nafshi, not just running to buy something, but running to it because you understand the thing itself, then you have to have Torah first. So what Chizkiyahu did was he permeated Yehuda with Torah, and by permeating Yehuda with Torah, he raised the level of the mitzvahs that people were doing. They weren't just doing hollow mitzvahs. They had dveikus, they had redifas achar mitzvahs. And once they had that, they can find in themselves the fortitude to resist the urge to have bumas in the back. So, later in Chizkiyahu's reign, meanwhile, Ashur, Assyria, was getting very strong, and there was a confrontation between Ashur and Mitzrayim, Egypt. And Israel is right there in the middle. It was caught in Israel didn't exist anymore, but Yehuda was there and was caught in the middle. So Ashur invaded Yehuda and they besieged Jerusalem. And Nes happened that during the night was 180,000, I remember the number offhand, the Syrian soldiers died, and Sancherib, who was the king, ran away. He went back to Nineveh, and he was assassinated by his sons, and that was the end of the Assyrian threat. This thing that happened, this miracle, was recorded in history, and there's a lot of archaeological proof that it happened. And the Herodotus, who was a Greek historian, reports that the Egyptians co-opted the story, and they said that the story happened, on the border of Egypt, and in the middle of the night the mice came, and some kind of a fanciful story. But it was a story that was well known in the entire area, and this happened, and it was a big mess, and Yehuda managed to survive under the leadership of Chizkiyahu, and everything was great until it wasn't. Thank you very much. See you next time. I'd like to invite you to visit me at rabbireiman.com and explore all my works, both completed and still in progress, and kindly take the opportunity to lend your support on the participant page. Thank you very much, and be well.